So I'm here with Aubrey Foard. He's the principal tubist with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, formerly principal tubist with the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra, which is where I live. Fantastic group, and I've heard him play in that group, and he's absolutely terrific. And I'm excited to interview him here. So I'm just very excited to meet you finally.
Pleasure, Dylan.
Yeah, and it's great. And magic of editing.
Well, that's actually a really funny story because I was flying to a regional orchestra gig I used to do. I lived in LA, I was going to Colburn, and I won a job in the West Virginia Symphony. And it was actually a really great job because, you know, they would pay for your plane ticket, you'd fly in, you'd stay in a hotel, they'd give you a per diem. There were many nights where I was up until 3 a.m. doing things that I can't mention on camera. I would often take a red eye from LA or another point on the West Coast out to the East Coast and then connect to Charleston, West Virginia. So one day I was going through security and I saw a guy with a horn case, and I, for whatever reason, I usually don't do this, but I must have been feeling lonely or something. And you know, I had a bunch of time, so I went up to him and I said, "Oh, you play horn, I play tuba, my name's Aubrey." And he says, "Oh, hi, my name's Chris Cooper," and we shake hands. And Chris Cooper, for those of you that don't know, was in the Canadian brass for a long time. So he had some stories, and we, you know, went to the airport bar and we had a couple drinks. And then we were sitting next to each other on the plane, coincidentally, so we had a few more drinks and we were trading all these stories, and it was a really good time. And so, you know, we sort of kept in touch for a while after that, and he called me out of the blue about 2 or 3 years later, and he said, "You know, I know you've got this other gig in Charlotte, but would you be interested in, you know, teaching at UCLA?" And, you know, I said, "Sure, of course I would." And I sort of just, you know, hung up the phone. I was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen to me." You know, I'm not so lucky to get a job like that. You know, I sent in a few recordings of stuff I had made recently. Jens had judged me at the Music Academy of the West Concerto competition in 2005, which I had won. So he remembered me, he listened to the recordings, everything was good. And before I knew it, I was talking to the chair of the department and signing the employment paperwork, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
You can't make this up, man.
So now, having a gig in Charlotte and then a teaching job at UCLA,
Yeah.
like that, and flying back and forth as a tuba player.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? My guess has always been, I don't know for sure, I've always thought he's got to have horns in 2 different places.
I do. Yeah, I have a couple tubas that live in LA, and I've got a few that live with me in Charlotte and now in Baltimore. Yeah, it's so that part of the job makes it easy. As a tuba player, I get to just jump on a plane with a backpack that has, you know, a change of clothes and some, you know, repertoire books in it, and, you know, maybe like a tablet and some other electronics, and just arrive and go straight to school and play on the tubas that I have there. It's been pretty crazy, but, you know, I mean, I've got great students who I love to teach. I'm happy to make it work with my, you know, much more intense schedule in Baltimore than it was in Charlotte. Of course, you know, there are a lot of days where it just, you know, it's really hard to get on that plane. You know, usually what I'll do is I'll fly in I'll take a 7:30 a.m. flight thereabouts on Monday morning, fly in, get into school around noon on the West Coast, and then teach for 5 or 6 hours, and then go hang out with family. I've got family who let me stay at their place, and, you know, go to sleep, wake up at 6 a.m., drive to school, teach another 2 or 3 hours, and then get back on a plane and fly back to DC or Baltimore. It's a really, really crazy couple of days. And of course, the more successful the students get, the more they have, the greater their demands of my time is. So, you know, before it was just like, oh yeah, you know, fly in, teach for a little while, you know, have the rest of the night off, do a little more teaching, and then fly out. And now it's just like fly in and then just teach. But, you know, I mean, you know, that's just the price of having students that really want to, you know, are really driven to succeed. Yeah, Tommy was just such a mensch. I mean, I never got to meet him, but I mean, the legend, his story, I mean, it's just one of these things where, a lot of tuba players just get so involved as musicians and as teachers and as advocates for our art that, they just leave this footprint that is just like a dinosaur print, I mean, like everything that Tommy did is still a huge part of what LA as a pedagogical scene, as a film scene, as a gig scene, Tommy influenced all of it. Yeah, I mean, I've got a big picture of him hanging in the studio, and I mean, again, I've never met him, so I can't say anything based on personal experience, but in spite of that, I'm still just tremendously grateful that his influence and his his sort of gentlemanly attitude,
He was really quiet. He never talked about his faith, but it was very important to him. Like he went to church every week and all that. But he was he was giving and he was kind.
That's a great question, because people ask me that all the time, and I'm glad that it's going to be documented now. Maybe less people will ask me. When I was in 4th grade, they had all the 4th graders assemble into the gymatorium. One of these sort of dual-use gyms that is also an auditorium. They gave us all a presentation on joining the band, right? And all the virtues of doing that and playing an instrument and practicing and all that stuff. And then they would hand out these really poorly Xeroxed pictures of every instrument, just black and white, grainy sort of thing. And my dad was a bassoonist. He played in the Milwaukee Symphony for 27 years. My mom was a violinist, still is. And she was like their first call sub for about 20 years. So, I chose the bassoon. I circled that as my #1 choice, but you had to make 3 choices, and rank them. So bassoon was #1, and tuba was #2, and French horn was #3. And they didn't have any bassoons. They neglected to tell us this, but they didn't have any bassoons, so I got put on the tuba.
Even though your dad probably had one.
A tuba?
A bassoon.
Well, not one for a 4th grader to play. Yeah. I guess I kind of got into it because they had like a practicing competition that I really wanted to win, because I'd never really won anything at that point. So I practiced a bunch those first couple years. I think it was like 6,000 minutes in a semester, something like that, yeah, I got some movie tickets, which turned out to be restricted. You could only use them certain times a day for certain movies. So all that practicing for,
That's what you won
small payoff. Yeah, that's what I won. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
But, the love of it sort of stuck with me. And I decided in my freshman year of high school that I really wanted to do it. And my dad just kind of flipped out because he was a professional musician and I didn't practice. And I wasn't really all that good, So he convinced me to sort of go the music education route, but I practiced a lot after that. And then he eventually got me set up with the local symphony player in Milwaukee, this Milwaukee Symphony tuba player, who was Alan Baer at the time. And of course, Al took me under his wing and really pushed me hard. And I practiced a lot, and he had me play a lot of really challenging repertoire, and that's sort of how I got to college. And there's a lot more history, but I don't want to spend the entire time talking about how I got to where I am today. Al was so great about, getting you to focus on line and music and and sound, style, that sort of thing. And then, Ron Bishop, of course, was a big student of Arnold Jacobs, but he really had his own way of sort of teaching things. He had ways of teaching that had really worked for him as a player, so he'd pass those on to his students. And he was an incredible musician. I mean, just hearing him play in the Cleveland Orchestra, and I was very lucky that I got to sit next to him a couple times in the orchestra, on tour, went to Carnegie Hall, went to Europe a couple times. I was very young, I was 22 years old. I can't promise I knew exactly what I was doing, but the musical, the way that you would, come up with ways to phrase just smaller phrases, but also incorporate that into a larger sort of sense of overall phrasing. And everybody in the Cleveland Orchestra phrased like this, so you go hear a concert, everybody's just sort of on the same page. That's the sort of thing that just stays with you for life.
That Rite of Spring recording with Boulez is one of my very favorites. I mean, I have a bunch of the recordings of that, but
yeah,
that's one of my favorite ones.
So precise.
Oh yeah, that one's fantastic.
And then Dave Kirk, of course, really made sure that I was fully built up fundamentally, taught me so much of, teaching fundamentals that I use today, blowing freely through the tuba, really making sure that, the air is being moved as freely as possible, making sure that you're using as little as tension as possible to produce sound, really thinking about vowels and the shape of your mouth and all that stuff. And then really, he really pushed me on style in a way that I don't think I'd really been pushed before. So, he really set me up for, real success as a professional. And then Norm, of course, was just the extra musical sort of polisher that I had always wanted. And the brilliant thing about Norm is that, he's very good at adjusting his teaching style depending on the level of the student. So I know that with like undergraduates, he really digs into moving air and all that stuff. But with like a student like me, at that time I was already 25, I'd been in school for like 7 or 8 years. So, he's just like, oh yeah, sounds good. It just needs to be more musical. and he pushed me on that a lot. And it took me a while to sort of figure out what he meant until one day we were playing duets in a lesson, and he was playing circles around me musically. I was like, oh, this is what he wants. And ever since then, it's just been like, yeah, this is what I need to do. And it's that sort of extra little detail that you take into auditions that really separates you from everybody else.
Following up with Norm,
yeah,
he just announced his retirement, right?
That's right.
Okay, so as a teacher at UCLA, are they going to hold an open audition for the LA Phil, and might we see Aubrey Foard there, even though you just got tenure?
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. As you know, LA Phil is one of the most prestigious orchestra jobs in the world. So is the Baltimore Symphony, but LA Phil is about as high as you can go.
That'd be the lifetime gig.
Yeah, that would be the lifetime gig. There would be no more auditions happening in Aubrey Foard's world after that. I'm not counting on it. I know that everybody and their mother and brother will be there, and that's fine. And that's really the thing to remember about auditions, is that they're a total crapshoot. I've won auditions where I certainly wasn't the best player there that day, but maybe I played the best that day. So that's just how things go. That's actually kind of a funny story too, because when I transferred to CIM, I started my undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I was studying with Al, who was great and really good to me. But it was a music education school, and I needed to be around people who were trying to do what I was trying to do. So I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music to study with Ron. Right at the beginning of the school year, they held substitute auditions for a bunch of regional orchestras. Canton was there, Akron, I think, was there. The Warren Symphony, the Warren Philharmonic, something like that. Warren, Ohio was there. You know, a bunch of things like that. And so I auditioned for Canton, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but you know, I practiced pretty hard, and I played some excerpts for the music director and the personnel manager, and they put me on the sub list. I was like, hey, great, I'm on the sub list. Not expecting to get any work out of it. And then January of that, my junior year of school at CIM, they called me up and they said, can you come down here and play? Turns out that the tuba player in Canton at the time, Eric Bubach, was being asked to sub a lot in Pittsburgh. So I ended up playing close to 2 full seasons with Canton, which was a really good regional orchestra. They had a lot of CIM students who would come down there and either win permanent chairs or be subbing. That was a really, really great start to my professional career.
And what was the first orchestral job that you won at an audition?
Oh boy, it depends on how you define one, because the first job that was mine forever, so to speak, in other words, it wasn't like a 1-year appointment with a regional orchestra or something, was the Albany Symphony. But I didn't win it. Aaron McCullough won it, and then a week later he won Naples, Florida. Yeah.
And so they gave you a call and said, why don't you come up? You were the runner-up, we want you to come.
Well, I think I called them. I was like, hey, so I was runner-up, you guys still want me to, you know? And so she called me back like a couple days later, and yeah, she said, yeah, come on up and, you know, you can be our principal tuba player, and you were designated runner-up, so the job's yours. And so at the time I had just started school in Houston at Rice for my master's. And so I started just flying up once or twice a month, you know, going up to Albany, and I did that job for 4 or 5 years. It was really interesting. We actually did quite a bit of recording in that orchestra. David Allen Miller was a huge, huge new music proponent, and he still records with that orchestra. And in fact, I think they went to the Shift Festival, the very first one at the Kennedy Center, about 5 years ago. It's a new music festival celebrating orchestras that do commissions, you know, do diversity. Baltimore is allegedly doing it next year, assuming we're back to work by then. Yeah, that was my first real job. And yeah, it was interesting. I learned a lot. Some great players that still play in that orchestra are there, and yeah, it's a really, really fascinating gig.
Sounds like you've been on the road more than a lot of orchestral players I've known.
Yeah, well, so that's basically when I first started being on the road in 2005, and I've more or less been on the road ever since. Yeah.
So you're looking to settle down.
I'd like that, you know, eventually. Yeah, I'd love to be able to commit to just one city, but for now, I mean, you know, the job that I have at UCLA is tremendous, and like I said, I've got incredible students. So, you know, for the foreseeable future, I'm doing that. Well, you know, I mean, Charlotte's a very good orchestra. When I was there, we put on some really great concerts. We had some incredible musicians, and they're still there. You know, I was sort of taken under the wing, I suppose, a little bit by our music director, Christopher Warren Green. And he had me do a concerto a couple times while I was there. And so that was really great. And of course, the colleagues were like family. I mean, everybody was so just welcoming when I got there. Yeah. So Charlotte's a really good orchestra, and I certainly miss everybody there. Baltimore, when I got there, you know, I'd grown up listening to the Baltimore Symphony, of course. You know, those recordings that Commissiona and Zinman had done were just, you know, they were part of my childhood. Of course, I had heard the BSO, and I knew it was a great orchestra, and I knew some of the people in it, but I didn't realize just how great of an orchestra it was. I mean, you know, just sitting there for the first couple services was, you know, my jaw was just kind of on the floor at just how strong everything was. And that's partially just because the standards are so high, you know, and you've got to really bring it to every service. I mean, everybody is, you know, practicing their music for 2 weeks in advance, you know, of whatever's coming up. So, you know, and we cycled through so much rep this year, so much rep. And by and large, you know, all of it was played at a very, very high musical standard. There were some pieces that we did, some weeks that we did, where, you know, I mean, I would hold it up against just about any orchestra in the world. I mean, it was really just that high quality.
An orchestra like that, do they give you the music in advance so you can take a look at it, or do they typically sight read through things, even, you know, maybe new things that no one's seen before?
We always get our music about made available to us about 3 to 4 weeks in advance, and yeah, so you know, you always have the opportunity to practice that music a couple weeks in advance, and by and large in Baltimore, everybody does. I mean, again, it's almost like, you know, just trying to stay afloat, you know, trying not to drown. And since everybody's, you know, working so hard, you know, if you don't keep up, you know, if everybody else doesn't feel it or know it, you know it. Well, the community support has been just incredible. The public is, you know, from all outward appearances, is very much on the musician's side, which, you know, has just been so heartwarming. Going through this, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I wouldn't recommend it to a single soul on earth. The kind of pressure that it puts on people's home lives is just, you know, unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. And of course, you know, I mean, my wife has been very supportive, and you know, I mean, she's the love of my life. I couldn't imagine going through this without her. You know, the amount of uncertainty that it instills in just everything that you do, and the amount of just sort of, you know, pain that you feel, you know, having sort of, I mean, this playing in an orchestra like Baltimore is sort of, in a way, sort of the culmination of my dreams. You know, I mean, if I could win another job at the very top of the echelon of orchestras, I will, and I'm going to try. But if I don't, it's okay, because it's the Baltimore Symphony sort of thing. Except now it's like, oh, by the way, you know, we're not going to do and be what we were when you auditioned here. You know, we're going to change this so that it's a lesser group. And that's really hard to accept that. I mean, I know some of our players are worried about making it through the summer, let alone making it, you know, if the lockout continues for, you know, a period beyond the summer, making it through that. Of course, we've got a ton of resources. ICSOM, the AFM have all been really helpful. Our local union has been very helpful. There's an organization called Music Cares that is designed to help in situations like this. I think we'll all make it, but yeah, there are certainly players who are a lot more sort of up against it than I am. I'm pretty fortunate in that regard. The most important thing everybody can do is to follow us and like us on Facebook. You know, that's our sort of primary outlet of speaking to our supporters. And we've got 10,000 likes right now, which is a pretty good start. I have a feeling that'll grow substantially in the next few weeks and months. If there is some way to help, then we will let you know via that channel. Like Baltimore Symphony musicians on Facebook, and you'll see all sorts of opportunities to help, whether it's something as simple as, like, you know, buying a Baltimore Symphony musician's t-shirt or a mug or something, or signing a petition. You don't have to live in Baltimore, you don't have to live in the region, you can live anywhere in the world, and there will be opportunities to help. And we, of course, greatly, greatly appreciate that. Well, I'm a Meinl Weston artist for Buffet Crampon, so I have 3 Meinl Weston tubas. This is a 2250 F tuba, and I am a huge, huge fan of it. It plays very well centered. The sound is big but very chord driven. It's easy to play, so you can get around on it very easily. So this is my F tuba. I use this Aaron Tyndall, Dennis Wick Ultra mouthpiece, the AT8 model on it. It's actually, I think it's the smallest F tuba mouthpiece, and it's really great, really resonant. My primary C tuba is the Alan Baer 6450. It's a handmade. I think it's worth about as much as a new Camry at this point. Yeah, of course, that's just a terrific horn. And then I have an older Meinl Weston 2155, sort of large 4/4 C tuba that I play occasionally on Pops programs like classical stuff, that sort of thing. And of course, I have this Giddings and Webster mouthpiece, Alan Baer 2006 version. That's also pretty great. And I have an old, oh, you have that too? Yeah. Yeah.
I like it, yeah.
And I have an old Mirrophone, well, old at this point, it's 20 years old because I bought it when I was 18 or 17. Yeah, an old Mirrophone 181 that lives in my tuba studio at UCLA. It's also a really, really great horn. Got me through a whole bunch of years at college, and through my first full-time job in Charlotte, I won my audition playing that. Well, I just got here at the festival and I immediately started teaching, and then I started talking to you. So I actually haven't seen anything yet. I do love the region around here, around Emory, and I love Atlanta. It's a great town, some incredible food here, very beautiful town. I love the Beltway, visited here a couple times when I was living in Charlotte, you know. That's been pretty terrific to be back here, and I look forward to being able to just go out and explore whenever I have some time here. Of course, you know, my experience with the festival thus far has been Adam Fry and his organization. And of course, you know, Adam is very meticulous, and he has done an incredible job of putting this whole thing together. So, you know, I'm of course super grateful to him for having me out here. As far as the second piece of your question, the advice, boy, there's so much advice. There is so much advice. I suppose the primary piece of advice would be to, well, it would be two things. Listen. You know, go and listen to as much music as you can, and not, for goodness sake, not just tuba music, okay? I mean, listen to tuba music, listen to euphonium music, or whatever instrument that you play, but also listen to, you know, the orchestra stuff. Listen to string quartet, chamber music, you know, really get to know classical music, the genre, and not just music specific to your instrument. And then the other piece of advice is, you know, practice to achieve what you're trying to do, okay? You know, don't just sit down and practice until you're blue in the face. There are times where, you know, that feels good, and you should do that when it feels good, but don't do it every day, you know? Really think about what you want to do in your practicing that day, and then set to work doing it, you know? And try to focus on getting that job done. You know, when I was a freshman and a sophomore, I mean, I was, you know, I practiced 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day, every single day without fail. I can't promise that most of that practicing was productive, you know, just sort of beating my face up every day. Now, like I said, is there a time and a place for that? Yeah, Yeah, sure there is. You know, sometimes it does just feel good to just play for hours at a time. But for the most part, you know, I think it's a lot more productive to just focus on, you know, getting done what you want to get done, what you're trying to get done. And then, you know, once you've done that, well, if it feels good, work on some other things and try to, you know, accomplish something there. Or, you know, put the horn down and go live your life, you know, go listen to some more music. It does, in fact, you know, in a way that I sort of take for granted and try not to, being able to just breathe, you know, from the bottom of your lungs all the way to the top and just be able to move air simply and freely is aided so much by intense cardio exercise. A lot of the times I'll have a new student come in my door, or I'll be teaching a master class, and I may even say this tomorrow to students who don't seem like they're really moving their air enough. The first question is, you know, what sort of exercise do you do? And I'm not going to make any student go out there and, you know, do some rowing or do some running or swim or that sort of thing. I'm not going to make anybody do that, but I am going to strongly recommend it, because then you don't have to spend, you know, 20 minutes a day just doing, you know, breathing exercises to remind yourself of how to move air. You know, it's just a natural part of who you are. So I've found that to be incredibly helpful. I actually find that interval runs sometimes help with anxiety as well, you know, because if your heart is beating that fast already that day, then, you know, you're not going to get too worked up about missing a note, you know. So that's how that really.
And with auditions probably too. You get, because I mean, I don't know, but I would think you'd get nervous.
I take a beta blocker for auditions and for any major solo performances. I've got a recital. I'll probably take a beta blocker for that tomorrow.
Now, what is a beta blocker? What does it do?
It's just a pill that you take that slows down your heart rate a little bit. That's the primary purpose of it. It does tend to slow down your mind a little bit too, but I would consider that more a side effect. Its primary purpose is to slow down your heart rate. And, you know, I mean, the greater doses, it was originally intended as a heart rate medication for people that were at risk of heart disease. They found out that a happy side effect is dealing with, you know, anxiety. And so a lot of professional musicians take beta blockers before auditions and before other major performance events, so that they can, you know, most importantly, keep that heart rate slow, because if you're a wind player, of course, you know, your heart is beating a lot faster when you're nervous or anxious. And so it's using up a lot more oxygen, which means that all the breaths that you planned are now basically kaput. You practiced for months working on these breaths, and now you can't do them anymore, and you've got to sort of make it up on the spot. And that's an easy way to sort of, you know, risk messing up your performance. So that's sort of the primary purpose, but of course having a slightly slower mind also helps to make sure that you can stay focused on accomplishing the task at hand.
Thank you so much, Aubrey, for being here with this little interview we did here today. I just thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and finally meeting you, and thanks for coming out to this festival. I'm sure everybody who gets to meet you and hear your masterclass, is it tomorrow you're doing the masterclass?
Yeah,
I'll be really excited to hear it, and just keep up the great work. I wish you all the best in the future, and hopefully the Baltimore Symphony will get back up and running as soon as possible. And we encourage you viewers out there to like the Baltimore Symphony on Facebook. Give it a big thumbs up.
Like the Baltimore Symphony musicians.
The Baltimore Symphony Musicians, that's right. Search for the Baltimore Symphony Musicians on Facebook. Give them a big thumbs up. Follow what they're doing so you can support the orchestra and get them back to the world-class status of playing concerts every week that they were before this lockout. So anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Awesome, man.
Way to go, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's good to meet you.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the finished product.